Hey y'all, it's Renegayde, and it's time to spill some reality as we take a look into Netflix's second season of The Mole. Over the last 2 weeks, we've gotten 8 out of the full 10 episode season, and tonight we're going to take a deep dive into our remaining suspects to see if we're able to piece together exactly who is the mole before finale night. Joining me in our two-part series on this show are two of my favorite co-casters who are no stranger to the podcast. Let's welcome back from our Survivor 46 podcast, the undercover cop posing as a stay-at-home dad, at least I think so. It's Doug Dimmadab. Doug, how are you feeling tonight, and have you been enjoying the season overall?
I'm doing Gallaudet tonight, and I've been enjoying the season pretty much. It's been as good as season one, and both of them have been great seasons and great additions to the Mole franchise as a whole.
Any mole is the goal at my point of view here. And I agree. I do enjoy the Netflix iterations. They're very different from the ABC situations here, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit here before we get into our deep dive. But I want to get our other podcaster in tonight here from both our Survivor and multiple Drag Race podcasts here. I think he may be using this experience on the Mulk podcast to partially audition for a perfect match. It's QuackrrJack. Jack, how are you doing on your end tonight, and what are your overall thoughts on the season so far?
What do you mean audition for a perfect match? What does that mean?
I
But
see you trying to get on the Netflix universe here, Mr. Tony, getting into a relationship right off the bat. I see you. I see you.
I mean that was a great strategy. I love that. I really enjoy this season, and I think what makes the season more fun for me is that there are people I dislike, but there a lot of the people that I dislike ended up going out earlier, or some of the people that I dislike could still be the mole and weren't like so obviously not the mole at this point. So I'm really excited because a lot of the people in the final six, like I'm torn between who I think the mole is.
I agree too. I think there's a very interesting mix of people left, and I'm very torn on the more who it may possibly be as well. But I don't know if that's necessarily because things are that great here. Um, I'll just be honest here for to kind of age myself a little bit and just kind of compare us back to the long time the in the beginning of the the dawn of TV when it first started here in the early 2000s. I know none of y'all were alive during the first actual airing of the ABC Mole, but when it first came on, for me, it was immediately one of the top tier shows like Survivor, Big Brother was up in the pantheon there. I still put it above Amazing Race as far as I'm concerned, but uh, and I will still say at this point, season two will still go down as one of my all time favorite reality TV experiences of all time. Such a great season. If you have not watched The Mole 2, The Next Betrayal, go watch it. Such a good season. Um, but as someone who was such a huge fan of this ABC series, one thing I want to touch on before we kind of get into our deep dive with the people is just some small criticisms I feel like for me personally on the season is because it feels like there's a very different vibe from the Netflix seasons than there were in the ABC seasons, and I feel like for two particular reasons here, I'm kind of having a little bit of an issue with my watch here. And one, I'll be honest, I know you kind of enjoy him. I don't know if I love this cast together as a whole. Uh, For me, I feel like when it comes to Netflix, they're not. I mean, I'm not ever going to expect top tier casting from them. They definitely cast in their particular stereotypes. I feel like they definitely did that here, and they definitely Netflixerized, without a better way to say it here, the mole here. So it feels a little bit more sleazy, feels, definitely a little bit more convoluted and confusing. And dare I say that a lot of these people are just kind of unlikable? Like, I feel like Muna maybe is the highlight to me. She's probably the person that I feel like stands out the most. But as far as the cast, I feel like there's not a lot of positive synergy here. Like, it feels like everybody's very cutthroat and it feels like there's a meta this season that everybody just needs to sabotage everything, which I don't feel like is necessarily the true spirit of how the mole works. And Jack, I kind of want you to comment on this portion first, but what are your thoughts about how it seems like every single person this season is sabotaging?
So this is like one of the most fun things for me, like why I enjoy the show. And I know it's like one of your negatives, but I think it's so funny that so many of the people are like, I don't care how much money we get. I just need to be at the end because like I need to get the money. And if I'm not at the end, I'm not getting the money. And I agree with that because logically it makes sense. You need to get money, and the only way to get money is to make it to the end. So I'm kind of living for everyone sabotaging. And I think there's a lot of fun moments where people sabotage. They explain why they sabotage, and then like things still don't go their way, or they get kicked out eventually. And I'm like, well, that was interesting. And then we have people who are sabotaging, explaining it, still in the game, and they're like trying to throw people off their tail or like trying to get them on the wrong tail. But there's so many people doing that I'm like, well, are y'all like actually the mole and just trying to make it very obvious so you do a switch on us, like where we're like, oh yeah, you're definitely trying to act like the mole so we don't think you're the mole anymore. And then we have the few people who may or may not be sabotaging, don't really explain it, or might just not even be sabotaging, might just be like making mistakes. Like there's just so many different elements of sabotage or what you could claim as sabotage going on that it's really hard to decide, is it sabotage? Is it a mistake? I don't know, because some of the people seem like they should be intelligent, but then based on the actions I've seen, I was like, I have a hard time believing that you do what you do for your life and you have like zero awareness of things. So I don't know. It's hard to say.
Hmm. I think another reason why I personally am having issues too, is, again, with the whole Netflix thing, is the editing. For me, is very hard to keep track of. It feels like, for me personally, this is not the genuine experience that these people lived out there. It definitely feels, in a lot of ways, that I know that we tend to get like a story that's generally, it's gonna, especially like Survivor. We'll take Survivor for example. We're gonna see a story, especially like Survivor 46. We're gonna see it from a perspective here for why the winner won, and we're gonna get a journey along the way, and we're gonna kind of fill in blanks, as the season goes with how they eventually get to the end. In this particular season, it feels like a lot of the things that we're seeing may not necessarily be maybe represented accurately, or even at the same time too, I feel like we might not be even seeing everything that is going on here. At the end of the day, maybe I do think there's probably a lot more sabotaging going on here, probably from our mole too, that is just being left out because maybe at the end of the day it doesn't matter. But it's still things that I feel like are important, because I feel like there's a piece of the story here that we're just constantly missing. And I feel like that's Netflix's way, instead of trying to sell a really cohesive narrative from start to finish, a way to just kind of have us have just like a crazy, surprising ending at the end. So for me, I don't feel like the edit is being completely genuine here. And I know from the past here, we've even had past players say in their confessionals that they are generally making things up to keep whatever narrative the producers want going, but it's not necessarily what they're actually thinking at the time. So while we are hearing certain people are like sussing certain people and then they get eliminated, who the hell knows if we're actually, those are the people that they actually are sussing, or those are the people that, producers are telling them to say at this point. Um, Doug, I know this is probably your first time doing a real live watching mole tracking at this point, but are you enjoying the process through Netflix, or are you finding it a little bit more convoluted than you were expecting going into this?
I feel like after going through Survivor, the last season of Survivor, it kind of feels like figuring out, oh, who's gonna be the winner of that season is like how we're trying to figure out who the mole is, because it could be anyone, and there's so many clues. Like it could be this, it could be that, it could be go in so many directions until the very end in the finale, which I think with this next episode we'll finally get a concrete answer, just like how in the finale of Survivor 46 we got a concrete answer of who the winner was going to be.
And I'm very excited here as well too, to some degree, because I do like the fact that it's very open ended. We have 6 people that are at the end of episode 8, which, by the way, if you have not watched up until episode 8 of The Mole, what the fuck are you doing here? Go watch it now. Why do you even click on this video? Because there's going to be nothing but spoilers here moving forward for our last 2 episodes here for the finale. So tonight, what we are going to do is we're going to go one by one through each of our final 6, as we try to determine which one of them has the best possibility of being the mole. Now, where we left off on the season, at the end of it, we got another cliffhanger, which I'm so sick of these cliffhanger endings. Netflix, can we just end with an elimination, please? We get a cliffhanger here, which I think is probably, again, another egregious cliffhanger here, where our final six will be heading into a double elimination, where only four of them will be making it out alive. And we find out at the end of this episode here that Hannah has the possibility of getting an exemption. Whether or not she gets that, we'll figure that out. But a very interesting kind of place where they leave us off here with our final six. But let's go ahead and talk about our final six one by one here. And we'll go in alphabetical order, starting with Deanna, our 50-year-old web sleuth and Netflix star of the Don't Fucks with Cats documentary. Now, as far as Deanna's time in the game goes here, I feel like she's a lot less sus than I'm maybe giving her credit for. I feel like for me personally, there's a lot of clues that I kind of found that feel like they go particularly to Deanna, but as far as what Deanna has done in the game, I don't necessarily think there's been any big moments of memorable sabotage here for Deanna. Now, as far as things where we started here, episode 1, she was the eyes in the sky. Didn't really see anything from her in the intruder mission here because she really didn't have really an opportunity to sabotage. And then in the phone booth mission, she took money over the correction. No real sus there. Episode 2, she was part of the raft building team, and she didn't really. I don't know if she was not contributing. She was kind of contributing. She was just kind of being a team player. I didn't really see anything there. And she was also one of the first people to stand up in the countdown mission. Now, episode 3 was the only time I felt like I saw any sabotage from her in the whole hotel heist situation here, because she basically takes the blacklight and all of the items for herself, and she wastes a lot of time using the blacklight and not kind of, actually using it to get the correct numbers that she needs. She ends up getting one of them, and then she kind of sells the fact that they need 12 instead of 21. And that always felt a little weird to me, that, like 12 and 21 are so similar. But as far as that goes, still, it could be a genuine mistake. But was still very, very, very weird for her too. And also, there was a poker chip that we saw in the room there, and I'm going to focus on that for a second there too, because I don't know how many of you out there know that Deanna is a data analyst for a casino in Las Vegas. So another clue that I kind of saw kind of point towards Deanna here, if that was a clue. But there was a lot of random shit in that room, so who the hell knows if any of those actually meant anything there. But in the episode 2, she lost $5,000 when she had the fortune cookie, but she was unable to sell that she was telling the truth, despite this kind of being her, I guess, persona in the game as the truth teller. They still voted her out, and she had $5,000. So did she attempt to do that? Did she blatantly attempt to get caught? Who knows? Episode 4, there was a few times where she was basically the main decision maker for the gala task, where she had the final say in which which people that they ultimately decided to go with. She ignored Q's description of who the female donor was, and then she also makes the wrong call on who the pilot was. Then in episode 5, she was also kind of one of the first people to speak up to kind of point the group in the wrong direction when they had the shipping container task, because she immediately says that she was sussing Muna. Everybody else apparently jumps on the bandwagon there too, and obviously Muna was not the person everybody was suspecting. So a little shady there, but also, again, Deanna viewed her video in the movie night task as well too. So Deanna has had some sus out for Muna the entire time. Seems legit. Now, the other part about episode 5 that I at least stood out to me is that at the top of the stack of the mole dossiers during the auction mission, whose name did we see? Deanna. Also, and all of the times where they show the computer, and happens every single time, by the way. I don't know if you see this, but most of the times when they show this computer, when they say the names who are the mole and they show the names of the people, the cursor is always hovering over Deanna's name. And I'm just like, this is always so weird. Why are all these things pointing to Deanna and she's not doing anything? We get another kind of clue for this as well too, because obviously you know here that she is in the Don't Fuck with Cats documentary. Well, there's bunches of cat motifs and stuff throughout, especially episode 6. When they're in the cave, the idol that they have to get is the tiger idol. another connection to Deanna. But we could kind of roll back there too, because Deanna also tries to bring Q back because she wants the money in. So why would the mole want more money in the pot? Questionable. She's still doing things here that are seemingly under the guise of a team, but we could still kind of see other kind of there could be other ways to read into it. Who knows? But honestly, episode 7 and 8, I didn't really see any sabotage from her at all whatsoever, other than the fact that she was moving very slowly in the mission. Basically, both of the missions, she was going slowly, and that was really kind of it. Um, but there was one thing I will say, another clue that I kind of saw to Deanna for in the team where they had to do the negotiation tasks. On the license plate, it said DEE 616. I don't know what 616 would be, but D being on there was just very weird. Be like Deanna D. Is that very obvious? I don't know. But like I don't know why all the clues for me are coming back to Deanna, but I feel like out of everybody here, she's not somebody I suspect at all whatsoever. Doug, do you have any opinions here on Miss Deanna and her time in the game so far? As we kind of ran through her history there. Anything stand out to you at all?
I feel like she hasn't really done too much, but then what if the mole hasn't need to do too much because everyone's just so busy sabotaging everything that so the mole's like, don't gotta do anything right here. So nothing really has kind of stood out too much really for me, except for like when she put in her two numbers very quickly. And
And that kind of
the
seemed more like she was just like excited, you know, more so than she was sabotaging.
yeah, that was pretty much it. I haven't really seen too much like that seems sabotage to me throughout the series from her. She at least the least amount from anyone left.
I definitely agree there. Jack, do you have any thoughts on Deanna here? And do we think she could possibly be the mole, or do we just fully expect Deanna to be out in an elimination or two?
Deanna kind of throws me for a loop because, and not to sound ageist, but she's her job. She has she has this like ability for like data analytics, for really showing us like, oh, I like can see patterns and stuff, but I haven't seen any good math skills from her. I haven't seen her been helpful on any like figuring out sequences, and there are times where I'm confused, and I don't think that I'm gonna ever go as in deep as you did with some of the subtle clues about Deanna. The only things for me that kind of stood out, like if I went episode by episode, is I remember Deanna's first interview and her personality in that versus her personality in the gameplay felt like a really big difference to me. Like Deanna felt like she was way more sweet and genuine in person, which like felt off to me because it's like you're not that. In the first challenge, she doesn't do anything really. Like the whole first episode, all she does is end up basically in the phone booth. Doesn't like sabotage anything. Nothing happens. The second challenge, she's on the raft team. She doesn't really contribute to the team, so it's kind of one of those. It doesn't seem like she's doing anything, but maybe that's her way of sabotaging by not helping and trying to not really like make anything good happen. In the third episode, I think is where we finally see her take like more of a larger role in the actual game at this point. Um oh, but I do want to say one thing actually I forgot about episode 1, or I guess technically episode 2. One thing was really interesting to me was that at the first elimination, Jen is eliminated, and we see that the people sitting next to Jen are Niche and Deanna, who happen to be the last of people to be called, which I thought was interesting that like Niche is cleared and then it's Jen and Deanna is the only person not called. I thought that was kind of interesting. Like it was just like is this a possible subtle hint? Maybe I'm going too far into that, but like it's maybe just a coincidence. Um but going back to uh episode 2, um she leaves the exemption pot pretty fast and lets all the other people kind of fight over who's going to get that exemption as the clock ticks down for their money. So she doesn't really seem like she's trying to sabotage there. episode 3, she's supposed to be this detective. She for some reason puts so much idea into this like 12 because they're seeing the number 12 everywhere, and then the code on the safe is 1295, I believe, like those 4 numbers, and she's trying to figure it out. So she immediately goes, let's do 12 95 95 12, and then it comes down to a coin flip. And I don't know, her team is just strange because they do end up getting the money, but it's on a coin flip, and she's supposed to be this great detective. And yet she found the first set of numbers, the 95 sketched in, and she doesn't go further than that. She's just convinced it's a 12, immediately says it's one or the other. I think that's like kind of strange because her as a detective, she should be focusing and making sure that it's not just a guaranteed, it should have been like like she should have known 100% before she did it. But like maybe that's just her making a mistake again. That's where it kind of differs. Like, is it a mistake? Is it just a sabotage? It's kind of hard to tell, and the editing does a great job of here. As past that though, honestly, I don't think Deanna does too much that's too crazy, other than when she's in the back of house for the next mission. She doesn't really do much. She just kind of stays in the back, lets things happen. She doesn't seem to be the most observant person, which is kind of why I'm confused as to why she was in the back of house, because she still claims that she's like really good with data and figuring out patterns. And I guess this is her best example of doing it, but she didn't really contribute anything to the team, in my opinion. Like, initially Muna finds out the coupons, Deanna doesn't do anything, then she makes some communication later, and then, as you mentioned, she completely shuts down Q and doesn't even listen to what he has to say for this woman who's clearly not on the board, and immediately just says, okay, there's another woman here, she doesn't match the description at all, but we'll just go with it because Q must not know what he's talking about. And so that's a big, like, are you just letting people ruin the mission and just letting it happen slowly because you don't have to do anything? Episode 5, one thing that she does do, and it's on a very lengthy episode, she does vote for Muna for the shipping container challenge, which could throw some hint at maybe she knows, because if you're the mole, you know who isn't the person that they should be putting the money towards. So she makes a vote for that and ends up getting the majority vote. Of course, she's not the only person involved there, but it is like she has been claiming she's been sus of Muna, so it does go with her story, but is her story just this good? Who knows? And I guess the only thing that's really shady in the cave mission that she's in is that Muna figures out all these sequences for the puzzles, and she decides to go against Muna and go with Sean, who's like says he's really bad at math, yet is figuring out a math puzzle where Muna told him the correct answer, and she agrees with Sean's side. I don't know if that's just like her incompetence, possibly, or like she just doesn't trust Muna at all, or she just really wants to go against the grain so that way they don't get money. It's interesting, but her team ends up getting the money in the end. So maybe she didn't feel like she had to go too far against, and she didn't want to like team up with Sean too much, because she eventually goes for the tiger. So it kind of looks like maybe that's not as much sabotage anymore, and just like her not trusting of Muna coming out. As far as that, the only thing I can think of is that she's in the final mission we see. She's in the house, I think specifically because she cannot do the task. They say it's randomly selected, but like this is nothing against Deanna, but like as an older person who happens to not be in the best shape for running miles, they probably selected Deanna to be part of the captured team because she's less athletic. And I, as someone who's not very athletic myself, like would think to be the person who was randomly selected for this. The only thing is, when she answers the phone, she does a really bad job of giving any information out in 15 seconds. And the only thing she says is that there's water below them, which is a very good clue. But at the same time, she is so frazzled and in shock. I don't know if this is just who she is as a person, or is she kind of sus? And throughout this season, we keep seeing her not trusting Muna, so there is a lot of continuity in her storyline. So I'm not sure that there is any reason to truly like gun ho on Deanna, but a lot of the subtle clues you poke up are really like, working in my subconscious, make me think maybe it could be this way.
That's my only reasoning why Deanna is still possibly in the running here is because all these subtle things that I keep picking up on that I don't. I'm pretty sure there are just random things that I'm picking up on here, and they have nothing to do with clues. But I haven't really found as much information, I feel like, on other people, so it's just very, very weird to me. I don't know. Um, I don't ever expect to see Deanna actually be the mole, but if she is, um, I would both be shocked and a little underwhelmed. Just because I don't, like I said, I feel like the mole always has that one big sabotage that we go back to. I don't think we got that from Deanna this season. That's why I'm very hesitant to put her any higher than maybe like fifth on my list overall. So we'll see if maybe Deanna could be our winner. I would love to see Deanna win it. Maybe she could put the clues together. Um I don't know if she will. But we'll see. Um let's go ahead and talk about our next contestant here. I know we're gonna have a lot to say about Miss Hannah, our 23-year-old marketing consultant, because she has been a force this season. I feel like she's probably easily most manipulative person in this cast. I don't think that necessarily translates to her being a mole though, but boy, is she so good at getting her way. Let's kind of run through some of her moments through the season as well here too. So we can start episode 1. She didn't do anything in the phone booth, but she was part of Zone 1 with the slingshot zone that was unable to hit any of the intruders, but also probably the hardest zone that they had there. So probably wasn't expecting anybody to actually get hit in Zone 1. So um, hard to really suss her here. Episode 2, she doesn't really have any luck trying to go underwater to get any of the case for her team here, so she just kind of let Michael do it. I guess I mean subtle sabotage by not doing anything, I guess. But her big moment, I think, is the moment where she decides to drain the clock down with her boo thing, Tony, and kind of just force everybody to get out of the room so she could get the exemption herself. And then she basically tells Tony to get up. Get up, Tony. I want my exemption. So after this moment here, to me, the desperation, the fact that someone was willing to give up that much money, and I think that that's a running theme here. We see it later on where someone literally gives up the whole entirety of the pot in another mission here, only for them to be eliminated in like 2 or 3 episodes after that. I don't think that's a mole move. I don't think the mole's going to do that. That is a player move that is trying to look like the mole. So I feel like after that happened, I had really no sus on Hannah ever. If I could be very honest here, even running through some of the things that she does moving forward from here, she has a few wrong guesses in the vault mission, but I mean, she was also supported by Tony there, so that wasn't entirely on her. She goes to view Michael's video during the movie night, taking money out of the pot there. I thought it was kind of sus that 3 people were watching her video because I didn't think she was that sus there, but Sean was one of those people that were watching her video, which I thought was kind of also out of the blue here. I didn't know if Sean was really sussing Hannah, but I guess maybe the whole situation that she had in episode 2 left a bad taste in people's mouths, so they wanted to see if they could trust her. Going into episode 4, also as well too, this is one of the big moments I think of the season here, and one moment that I do want to talk about because it has a this is where I'm talking about how the edit could possibly manipulate your thoughts on how the episode could go. Well, going into episode 4, again, Hannah viewed Michael's video because we're under the impression here that both Hannah and Tony are sussing Michael. But then during the mission, there was Ryan's infamous sabotage that we'll get in during her portion of the video here that Hannah notices, but she doesn't tell anybody about it in the group. So it could be sabotage as well too, that she doesn't say anything and just willingly loses money. You could look at it that way. Or we could also look at the fact that maybe Ryan is the mole. She's now onto the mole, and she has that information now in her back pocket. But the thing about this is it never comes up again outside the fact that Tony gets eliminated here. So I don't know if this is a situation here where Hannah is actually sus of Ryan because she never mentions it ever again. Um, and she also, at the same time, too, like the storyline, it just doesn't really go anywhere. I don't understand why this was brought up unless it was important later on, which it could be. I have a theory on that, but we'll save that for a second here. Um, Now, another moment in episode 5 that made me kind of think that Hannah wasn't the mole here is because her and Nish are having a conversation during the shipping yard mission, and they both seem very sus that everybody is saying Muna's the mole when they haven't heard anybody really mention Muna was the mole, which makes them think it was Michael who's actually, the correct answer here. And since they were correct and on the right path here, it kind of makes me not sus Hannah here at all either. She also said yes to Q coming back, money. Um, I guess her only other real sus moment, I guess to me, well, I guess there's two kind of spots here where she's kind of sussy. One would be the fact that she's hating on Niche so much that she basically picks the idol that he doesn't want just out of spite, which it turns out to be the wrong idol. And during the Indiana Jones mission, and then in the Detonator mission, there is a point here where she is taking a really long time when they finally get in contact with Michael and Ryan, and we could kind of talk about this in general throughout the next couple of people here since they're all here left. But I mean, each of them kind of makes a mistake here. Hannah takes a really long time explaining the situation, eats up a lot of time on the clock, trying to when she literally could have just picked up the thing and just said, "Hey, cut the blue wire." Instead, she explains the entirety of the story, and to the point where they have like 2 seconds left to make a decision, and then whatever happens in the confusion, they hear the wrong one and cut the wrong. So, I don't really blame that as much on Hannah, but I just thought it was interesting that she just wouldn't get straight to the point. And then episode 8, I didn't really see any sabotage from her. She felt like the most player here, basically leading the group at this point. So, for me, Hannah is giving me a lot of like joy energy from last season where she's gonna go out of her way to do whatever it takes to get the exemption, and that desperateness to have safety, I don't feel like that's full. I just don't. Hannah is probably the person that I have ranked least on my list here, and I kind of get the feeling Hannah might be eliminated in this double elimination just because the last few people that have gotten like these gigantic spikes in screen time, it's always happened right before they go on out. Like Niche had one right before you went out, Tony had one right before you went out, Q had one right before you went out. I feel like this
Like,
could have happened to Hannah. You're right, when Q went out twice. um, yeah, I do think Hannah possibly could be on her way out here, or she could possibly be your winner. Who knows? She's very savvy. So the one thing I feel like if there's anybody going to this finale that I don't think is the mole, I don't think it's Hannah. Jack, talk about Hannah here for us.
Hannah is our blonde bombshell kind of Barbie doll girl that we're supposed to, I think, kind of hate from the editing, I guess. She's kind of suspect in the fact that she's in the first zone, but like in the first challenge. But the first challenge is such a mess that like the first challenge, I don't know if you could necessarily sabotage unless you were purposely not hitting shots at like the very end of it all. So because she didn't pick her role and no one else really did, I think it just came down to we don't see much from her. She has this alliance immediately with Tony and supposedly with Jen, but Jen goes home immediately. So I'm not sure if they ever actually set up anything or really talked anything. Because if she was the mole, I think having more people would make sense. So that kind of takes her out of the running for me in that episode at least. On the second episode, it's weird because she kind of doesn't contribute anything in this treasure challenge. She's on the shipwreck team. She doesn't swim well at all. She doesn't do anything during this whole mission. And then after she doesn't do anything the whole time, like you mentioned, she's basically drained the pot to 10,000 with Tony, and she gets him to do what she wants by just batting her eyelashes. This could be a sus move, but it makes you seem very, very sus or being the mole, and then maybe it's too much at first. So I don't know if Hannah is really like mole material at this point in the season, unless she's trying to do a double take or a double fake, I should say. Since she never leaves, she gets an exemption. She goes to the third challenge for free. She ends up being on team 1, who doesn't get the money, and this is the thing that makes Hannah this is the moment when I said maybe Hannah is the mole, because in this challenge, she's the one that comes up with the combo of the code. She tries immediately the 2 codes back to back. She's like, oh, 348 has to be it, so let's put 6 in front of 348. Let's put 6 at 3486. She convinces everyone in the room, her and Tony together, like, we have to try these 2. And she's like, you figured out this flashlight. We found the numbers on the safe. They never look to use this black light basically ever again. Supposedly Q's going around the place just searching, but never finds any lit up numbers, which I think is still kind of strange. And then one other thing about this team that's really weird is randomly they never found the clue. In this team, it's Sean, Hannah, Tony, Michael, Q. 2 of these people have been eliminated at this point, but did one of the people in this team possibly hide the clue from everyone else? Is it possible that maybe Hannah was the person who found the clue? The apartments were different layouts, but they still had the same general kind of areas. Is it possible that Hannah took the clue, then tried to waste their guesses early on? And the team doesn't even take the full time to assess what the code could be after they find out the numbers are 3, 4, 6, and 8. They tried the 3, 4, 6, 8 immediately, which seems to be the dumbest choice for me in my mind. But I mean, it's not saying that that's Hannah. It's just a team thing that could just be very stupid looking at the end here. I'm not sure that Hannah's necessarily sabotaging or if this is just a huge mistake she's made, but it does raise suspicion, and I think that's maybe why Sean ends up looking at her video next. But that doesn't really make sense. I don't know, nothing really makes sense to me in these terms, what's going on. As far as anything else that happens, let's see. In episode 4, she's really good at determining who's the liars when they're trying to put money in the pot versus who has an exemption, who has money. She starts to suss Michael. Then she shares that information with Tony. Things seem to be going well for her at this point. So it seems like she's kind of she almost goes from a villain at it to a heroine at it at this point. It starts to slowly shift our narrative of her almost, because now all of a sudden it's not so much that she doesn't care. It's she wants to put money back in so she can get her trust back. I mean, Hannah doesn't really care that they're wrong about this pilot of the information in the next challenge when she sees Ryan possibly sabotaging. So she's still more about information and less about money, but because it's not known, you still see her being very selfish, but you don't know if it's to take money away or just for herself. And then her number 1 gets voted out, and she seems distraught about it, and the person that she was most suspicious of before this mission actually comes and comforts her. And maybe she has switched from thinking it's Michael to thinking it's Ryan. So she's gung-ho about getting this money in the next episode. And in the next episode, though, she tells everyone that she voted for Michael, which we find out Michael is the correct answer in the next challenge. What is interesting, though, is that she said she had these suspicions on Ryan. So is this a double take? What is going on? And if she voted for Michael, and Tony should have also been voting for Michael, it makes me question, how did Tony get out? And that, I guess that's a little sus on her part, but again, she technically voted for the right person, and she never tried to steer the team into the wrong answer. And as we know, during that challenge, they did, in fact, end up with, putting most of the money on the wrong crate. Into episode 6, the only thing that seems really sus is that she figures out the sequences pretty well for their team. She figures out everything that's going on, but she makes the final decision to not trust Niche no matter what because he took the exemption after draining their pot for it. And this could be a great cover for her to like immediately make sure they don't have any money, and she can blame it on Niche and be like, well, we're all mad at Niche. So it's a great cover story, right? But then she continues to be on this, what looks like trying to put money in the pot kind of idea. In the next episode, she's the only team that gets money. She could have, as you mentioned, like been more specific on the phone call and just told them exactly what she needed to hear. So this didn't happen. She was very gung-ho about getting an exemption for the negotiation in that episode. But so was everyone else. So, like, can we really hold that against her as a reason? I don't think so. And then finally, on the last challenge on episode 8, she's one of the only reasons that they actually find Ryan and Deanna in the shack because she calls out to them when she is at the gate that needs to be opened, where they're at the temple and stuff, and then they do find Ryan and Deanna just because, like, they can hear her screaming. The only thing on this challenge that is sus about that, though, is that Hannah is on the team of people trying to find other people. She's very convinced that she needs to watch Sean to make sure that he's not calling too many times to waste their money from the pot. And when Ari announces to everyone that the team needs to find both a key for the gate and for the temple, somehow everyone in that group that's searching for the key randomly forgets that they need 2 keys and not just 1 key. And so I guess that's somewhat sus. And then she starts to go against her previous teammate Muna. And so I'm not sure if she's giving us mole energy or if she's giving us like someone who is more becoming the, I guess, hero of our show at this point. You know, first she's very selfish. Now it seems like she might have had somewhat of a redemption, but now she's at this point where we get that cut off where we don't know if she's going to find the exemption or not. And she tells everyone she's going to take the money. They believe her. They send her off. She picks the 20K immediately, which could be a little sus. Like, what if she was the mole? She'd know where the 20K is, and then she could make it look really good by getting rid of the 20K for the exemption, because as we know, it's a double elimination. And if it were me, I'd be giving up 20K for the chance of getting exemption too. So Hannah overall, probably not the mole, but there are a few things here or there that could give her mole status. She's not my like number 6 least likely to mole person, but I'd say she's probably number 4 or 5 on my list.
I mean, you make some good points there, and I do agree with you in a lot of ways that I do think Hannah is our narrator. Basically, at this point, she's our protagonist. I think at this point, she's the one that we've kind of been following the most. We know most of her thoughts. That's why I don't think she's the mole, because we know too much about her and what she's doing. Like, I think everything that she's done, we kind of have justification for. So, I'm not really looking at Hannah. Doug, are you looking at Hannah at all?
I'm actually kind of looking at Hannah because we had Joy from the first season that was so like at the beginning trying to get the exemption, not really doing well, and then switch up in the middle and actually trying to get the money with the mole. Because it's been a couple years since that first season, they've probably seen it. Well, the mole does that strategy make people think, oh, they're not the mole. Also, when Tony got eliminated, what if Hannah lied about not telling Tony about Ryan?
I
And she
mean, we
told
would
him,
never know.
like,
Good point.
because you're talking about how the edit can lie. They're not telling the whole truth. So while she lied about not telling Tony about Ryan, then she still went for Michael. Or does the mole even vote?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of things that, again, we're only privy to what we have in the edit. So we kind of have to take the edit for what it is, at least at this point, based off of the story. Um, it would be a good story beat narratively, I guess, for her to start as the one that's, the selfish girl, and then she evolves into the team player and the gamer and whatever. Like that actually would be a good strategy, knowing that like this mission is coming up, and then you could take the exemption at this point where there's a double. Like that would make sense. But I also feel like a lot of these explanations sometimes are a little big brained, like, and I've come to the conclusion, like, a lot of these times the simple answer is always the best. If we're having to sit here and like reach and justify and have to kind of like jump through hoops to get to it, it's probably not gonna be the correct answer. So, um, I don't know. Hannah could still possibly be it. She obviously, like, everybody here has some possibility here, obviously. Um, I think she just gives me more player than most people here. So we'll see though. We'll see. We'll see if Miss Hannah gets the exemption and can get through the double, or perhaps she might be one of our two people out. We will never know. Just kidding. We'll find out next week. Let's get to our next suspect here. Someone who's been on the minds and lips of I feel like everybody this whole entire season, and that is Michael, our 30-year-old parking manager. Now, as far as Michael goes, I feel like there's actually a good list of at least something that he's done every single episode here. And that's partially why I'm kind of looking at Michael and I'm having a hard time getting him off my list, is because there are lots of reasons why I feel like everybody is suspecting him. But because everybody is looking at him, makes me not look at him. So let's go ahead and just kind of run through some things that Michael has done this season. I mean, starting right off the bat here, he did some subtle sabotaging in the invader mission when he's part of the people that have to hold up the turret, and he's very visibly slipping and sliding on the mud, and giving it so Andy has a really hard time on the sniper rifle. Truth be told, don't think they were ever going to get more than one person on this turret anyway, but is what it is. Um, doesn't go to the phone booth, but episode 2, Michael, I think, has a moment that I think a lot of people are talking about here. It's the fact that it's part of the shipwreck team, and he has a really hard time picking up that really heavy medical case. To me, it didn't look like it was that heavy, at least at first, but then after rewatching it, I was like, yeah, it looks like it was pretty heavy. But the way that he does it looks like he has it, and then at some point he literally just kind of takes it and chucks it back into the water, but then he chucks it even deeper into the spot. So I don't know if that was a situation where he's trying to make people think he is the mole, because he's basically been doing that and will continue to do that the entire season. But at the same time, too, that's a great cover to say if you're the mole, that you're just trying to make people think you're the mole. Something else Michael does in episode 2 is that during the countdown mission, he waits until $25,000 are left on the clock, meaning that I think that's what, like $20,000 that he waits to take out of the pot there based off of that. So, I mean, at that point, any money that's at that point goes out is just money on the cake. So, a perfect point for him to leave there right in the middle, and let some sus get on some other people who were going to stay in that countdown mission a little bit longer. In the Money Tower mission, he's rather inconsequential. I feel like he doesn't really do much. I don't feel like I really remember Michael being there. He was just very much so in the background, at least I feel like for me. Um, his team doesn't get the jewelry. He also costs the group $5,000 in the fortune cookie mission when he bluffs to get the exemption. But what I thought was kind of interesting as well, too, of the people that are choosing to bluff, too. Out of all the numbers he could have picked, he picked one of the smaller amounts. So I don't know if maybe that's just a more feasible number that people are looking at, that maybe won't cause as much suspicion if you're taking 5,000 out versus like 10. But something that I still noted there, that maybe he had the best bluff out of everybody, but also it could be a situation too where maybe he was told, like, go for a lower number if you're going to try to take the exemption and take some money out. So he also takes another $5,000 out the next day when he decides that Sean is now his number one suspect, going to see him at the movie night mission there. And the only person that views Michael at that point is Hannah. So I thought that was a little bit interesting, considering a mission later, Michael will be considered the most sus person in the entire cast. Now, the big moment again for Michael here is part of this gala task, in where we get this Michael versus Sean storyline, and why I'm having a hard time actually kind of deciding between the two who I think is most sus. Just because they do have that moment there where I think Michael lets Sean in that he saw his video, or at least kind of like insinuates that he saw it and he knows more about him than he's letting on. So Sean realizes that Michael is kind of becoming sus of him. So Sean takes the photo off the wall in the middle of the gala task, and it turns out that photo is one of the right ones. We'll get into how that affects my view of Sean momentarily, but the fact that, at that point, Michael is now onto Sean starts this whole storyline here. Michael notices it, and in the next mission, Michael causes some subtle sabotage because he doesn't want anybody to be onto Sean, so he joins the group think in piling onto Muna, which is obviously the incorrect answer. Turns out Michael was the correct answer, which both makes me suspect him and not suspect him, because if everybody's looking at him and this cast is as dumb as I think they are, I'm a little bit worried that they would be able to suss them out, this quick in the first batch of episodes. So, something that it makes me drop Michael a little bit more on my list here too. And personally, Michael says in episode 5 as well too, before they get to the auction tasks, that he wants people to think he's the mole. And I think he's going about it in a much better way, a smarter way than Sean is, because all of his sabotages are a lot more, they're not as over the top, they're not as dumb. They can't read into the fact that Michael is sabotaging when he's sabotaging. See some other things he does here. He says no to Q returning, so gets rid of the money, but then he lies and says yes. But they obviously immediately kind of realize Michael's lying and probably wouldn't want him back. So that was an interesting thing for him to kind of pop out and do there at that moment. Uh, he also lets Niche pick one of the wrong answers for the Indiana Jones task, and goes along with Hannah when she wants the fish idol, because it feels like he's part of the spite niche group. So that seems kind of justified there. Episode 7 though, episode 7. Ryan and Michael both at this point. I don't know how they fucked up this task as bad as they did. He's part of the. He takes forever. They take forever to even start moving on this task. They can't even figure out what they're supposed to be doing to start with. Then they take the clue with like 10 minutes left, open the box with 2, and then they hear the wrong color that they're supposed to cut, and cost the group another $10,000 at that point. Who knows if that's more on Michael or more on Ryan? But I'm looking at both of them like, how is one of you not realizing what's happening with the other one? And then you both justified the fact that you made the right choice based off of what Hannah said, when clearly that wasn't what she said. So, like, the fact that they're both in on the story, I don't know. It's questionable. Questionable. Um, then what else? And then episode 8. Actually, I actually thought Michael was actually really good episode 8. It felt like he was the most at his player in this seek and or the seek and find mission, or whatever the hell you want to call it, for they're trying to find Deanna and Ryan. Like, he contributed a lot. He and Hannah actually, despite Ryan's bad instructions, are able to find the building that they're at. So Michael contributes actually quite a bit here, to the point where it really makes me kind of question, is he that obvious of a mole, or is he just doing just a really great job of doing a bunch of subtle sabotages so everybody thinks he's the mole, and he's actually probably maybe one of the better players that we have here, honestly. Um, I'm mixed. I'm very mixed here. I'm leaning towards him being more of a player, because I slightly suspect somebody else more than him. Well, actually, a couple people I slight more than him. But if Michael turns out to be the mole, again, wouldn't surprise me here. But it would make me wonder why the edit was so kind of obvious here with Michael. Um, Now, Doug, I know you have some words here for Michael, because you've had him on your radar for quite some time. Talk to us about Michael here.
Oh yeah, I've pretty much had him on my radar since like episode 1, since when he seemed like he sabotaged Andy with the sniper. When he says that he slipped, but no one else really did. He's done a lot of like sabotages, kind of like been open about it, like very in front about it So maybe that could be the mole. Maybe, but then with something with episode 8 is in Muna missed where the second key, but all of a sudden Michael suddenly is like, "Oh, here's the key right here." How did he just find it all of a sudden when no one else did? Maybe as the mole, because since the mole was taking around where the mission is, maybe as the mole he knew exactly where it was, and as soon as someone missed it, he could just be, "Oh, I'm the savior here. I'm actually not the mole."
But wouldn't it just be better for him to just let them not find the key? That's my thing. It's like if his whole thing is like we're goals to be the mole, right? If we're trying to be the mole. I get that we do want maybe at this point, and I think that's another discussion here to have too, is because at this point they've lost over $500,000. So I'm like, are the producers just trying to get the money at this point? Um, I saw something else. Your point there, Doug. I saw that, but I saw that point with somebody else, and that's why I'm kind of pointing my finger at somebody else. I think Michael's portion of it, him just running back there and finding the key, was a lot less egregious than I think what one other person did in this task when that kind of happened and they were getting close to the end. So, um, I see you though. Is Michael still your number one top or your number one suspect?
He's up there. I think I've changed who my number one is based
Hmm.
on, but it's all based on like who Tony actually voted for when he went home. Because if he voted, whether he could have voted for Michael or maybe he voted for Ryan, and that's why Hannah was so shocked that he went home. Is that she actually may have told him, and they both did it, and she figured out that it may not be Ryan.
I feel like they would have told us though. I feel like that's something that they would have had. They would have shown the conversation of them sharing that information. Um, Mainly because there was a season uh, that happened before in the past where this kind of same situation happened here, where one person kind of fed somebody some information. They started working together. Then she realized once that person went that it wasn't that person that they were both sussing. So I feel like if that was the case, they would have shown us having her tell him. They would have made it a big deal of her keeping it to herself. Um, so I kind of disagree with that, but again, who knows if they're really manipulating the edit this much. um, yeah, let us know your thoughts on Mr. Michael here.
Okay, so Michael is a weird one for me because I think he became like a suspect for everyone in the show, like kind of early on. I think they've been kind of feeding us like bits and pieces of Michael doing things. Like the only thing Michael does the first kind of scenario, at least in my head on episode 1, is he slips on the mud. But to be fair, you can see that there was a lot of slipping going on in that mud because there were tracks in there. I'm not saying he isn't the mole just because of that, but I'm not really buying that like he is purposely sabotaging because it looked like it was just really slippery and muddy. And so then he suggests that one person from each group gets the chance to make the phone calls, and that's like the most from him in the first episode. In the second episode, he kind of gets voluntold again in what group he's in, and he's in the shipwreck group. This is where at first I was like, oh, it looks like he throws this box. But when I went back to view the clip, it almost looked like he was pushing off of the box to get back to air faster. And I was thinking maybe he just slightly panicked. And when he throws down the first aid kit, it's because he was trying to get back to air faster. But the thing is, he's always got this smile about him when he's up in the water. But again, if we're looking at the group, Michael, Hannah, Melissa, Ryan, Michael and Ryan are the only two doing anything in this group, anyways. So yeah, maybe he kind of messed up, but he definitely gets the box, and it doesn't even take that long in comparison to what it could. So a stall of like maybe 2 minutes probably isn't enough to really be a good sabotage in my mind. That being said, if we go into episode 3, Michael again is part of Team 1, the group that doesn't find the clue randomly for searching the apartment building, which I think is a big deal. And he seems to have zero impact or any kind of like uh play um inside of this like challenge going on. The only thing he did this episode really was say that they should wait before Hannah puts in another code. I don't know if I would say that that's like the biggest like suggestion, because if Hannah puts in 2 codes, they're both wrong. I would maybe also be like, okay, let's think about it. Michael does say though at one point that I believe that he says that they're wasting time, so let's get to searching immediately. And so they kind of ignore the backpack situation, but Q does eventually immediately get to the backpack, figures out the flashlight. So it could just be Michael, just trying to get the team together because he's worried about time, because Sean was so afraid of heights, but then does a really good job actually in comparison. So Michael doesn't have much of a say here. There's a few little things here or there. The only sabotage that might have happened is if he stole the clue, because I feel like maybe if the mole is in this group, they stole that clue, and that's why that group never had that clue to like open up to figure out how to get the code. In episode 4, we see Michael is the only one who gets the exemption. He's really good at lying. But to be fair, Michael isn't really on anyone's like suspect list, I don't think, at this point too much until he does this. Like, I don't think anyone's really thinking about him except maybe Ryan from the shipwreck challenge. I don't think anyone was like really sussing Michael that much at that point, so I don't really see like that as a bad thing. Like, everyone who got an exemption tried to lie to get the exemption, and you kind of can't blame them after what happened with the previous Tony and Hannah situation. And honestly, he didn't leave early on, but would I have left right away? I don't know, because he's what, 5th place essentially, since Sean, then Michael, then Ryan. Like, I don't know. It doesn't feel like he's much of the mole there. It just feels like he's more of a player. The thing that hits me the most, though, is in episode 4 when he does end up in the challenge in the back room. He clearly sees Sean. He doesn't bring it up. He doesn't really care. And then he should have been the one to realize that if he was aware of what was happening with Deanna and not being able to find a person that matched Q's description, he doesn't seem to care, and he doesn't care if that affected anyone. But at the same time, like, he's very suspect of Sean. Maybe he's too vulnerable or too obvious with Sean. They have a conversation later about it. So maybe he cares more about information than just about $10,000. Again, $10,000 isn't that much from the pot based on what everyone else has been taking anyways. So I kind of understand that. He switches his vote in the next challenge in episode 5. Instead of saying he voted for Sean, he says he voted for Muna. Now, this isn't too crazy, because if he is the mole, he's not going to say he voted for himself, because he couldn't vote for himself, first of all. Like, you wouldn't say that. But at the same time, like, saying that he's voting for Muna, when he could have said he didn't vote for anyone like Ryan did, is a little suspect, because he's one of the reasons the money gets on the wrong truck. And it's a very simple thing to do, because people are probably going to believe him, because everyone was saying they were voting for Muna, even though we know that was not really the case. So that is probably the second most sus thing that he's done thus far. And finally, for that episode, like, nothing really happens. That's crazy. He doesn't make the highest bet amount, so nothing happens there. Episode 6, he votes against Q coming back, but like, it makes sense. He tries to lie, but again, he's trying to get the money, and he doesn't want another player standing in his way. So I can't really blame him about being selfish here. When he's on the rope team, he doesn't really do anything. There's one time when he struggles and people were like, oh my god, is he sabotaging? But like, I'm sure there was a time where everyone struggled there. He says, Michael says M, but then he watches Niche pick the wrong symbol in one of their challenges and doesn't like try to fight him on it. And maybe that's a way in which he just was trying to avoid them getting the money. because he then also goes with the fish with Hannah to go against Niche. So this could just be a still I hate Niche for stealing all of the money from the pot thing. So like a lot of his actions are really easily to be explained, but at the same time, like it doesn't take him out of the running of being the mole. Like I don't think he's my number one suspect, but he's got a lot like he's got a lot of sus stuff going on. And I thought of him as maybe one of the more intelligent people until episode 7 when I was confused as to how him and Ryan couldn't do any kind of math or even make the decision to really open the clue until like the last 10 minutes of the hour-long challenge. And then when they're getting talked to over the phone with like a minute left, Michael screams to Ryan to like cut the blue. But when I went back and I listened to like the last 15 seconds of talk, I was kind of confused onto what I was supposed to be doing too. And I think this comes down to somewhat of a communication error. But if he is the mole, it was a really great way to like make it seem like it really wasn't his fault. And then I guess finally in this last mission, we see that Michael is in the team that doesn't go for the second key immediately. But as Doug mentioned, he finds the key pretty easily. But then again, he looked on a hook, like where keys generally are, because the keys were on a table and on a hook. These are two pretty common places. So I'm not sure that it's too sus of that. As far as could he be the mole? Definitely. Is he probably in the top half of people on my list? Yeah. Is he my number one? No. I think that he's giving me a little bit more player, and I wouldn't be surprised if he actually ends up being our winner of this season, just because I feel like he's doing a pretty good job. And I'm almost guaranteed that he is going to make it through the double elimination. I would probably be willing to bet that 20K that I assume Hannah's going to bet on him going through.
Well, I'm gonna say something. Hopefully, this won't be too spoilerish because we all watched the episode and previews, and they've shown this preview multiple times. But obviously, they're doing the bank heist mission over the next few ones. I'm pretty sure that's Michael that we see hanging in the thing because I'm pretty sure I saw his red hair. So yeah. Well, Michael and Sean both have some voiceovers during it. And honestly, I mean, hopefully this won't be too bit of spoilers. I don't know if this really is or not. The women, though, are kind of. I feel like both men might make it through. The women, though, I feel like 2 of them are going because I don't know if we have any solid proof that either of them are there. But I think we hear Sean very clearly say something like "Watch out for the lasers," and then we see Michael.
Yeah.
So, I'm a little worried for all the women here. One way or another. That's why I'm having a hard time because I feel like my main suspect is a woman here. But they've had this Sean versus Michael storyline this whole time, and it's just very hard to. I mean, I would believe one of them being the mole here, just based off of the fact that they've had this running storyline this whole time too. And I think something very common that they do in the mole is when one player starts to suss who the mole is, they have the mole start sussing that player because obviously those 2 people are generally going to be at the end. I mean, if they're onto them immediately, then so it just makes sense narratively to be like, okay, well, I think that person's the mole because their chances of being at the end are high. So there's the drama. So if both Michael and Sean are sitting at the end here, and one of them turns out to be the mole, again, would not be shocked. I don't think I have. They're both my number 2 or 3. They keep kind of going back and forth here, but I still suss one person more. But that one person is not our next contestant that I'll talk about, who's Muna. Muna was initially my first mole suspect, though, just based on the facts in the preview and like the intro. She's the only person that does not say that she's the mole. And I also feel like she's the only person in episode 1, outside of kind of like Michael slipping and sliding, that they kind of show doing any sort of sabotage. She takes the correction over taking the money for the pot, but that seemed just more like a more coincidental thing. The more that I kind of like sat down and like really thought about it, like there's no way to guarantee that she's going to be one of the 3 most trustworthy people on the cast. There's no way she can guarantee that vote. So I feel like that was just an opportunity that she took, more so than her actually like planning to do that. She was also part of the slingshot group in episode or the zone 1 there too, so there's not much she really could have done with the slingshot either. So while I was initially sus of Muna, I feel like the more things came on with Muna, the more I'm kind of like, I don't know. No. I will say there is one moment here, episode 2, that I don't know if I could justify this. When they're building the raft, she's part of the raft team, and she suggests to shorten the raft, which makes it way harder for them to carry any of the supplies on the treasure, which I don't understand why she suggested that. I mean, they still won either way, but that was probably the most sus, one of her most sus things that I think I'm still trying to help justify here. But who knows? Maybe she thought it would be a better idea to not use so much stuff. I don't really know. Um, she also waited a really, really, really long time in Countdown. She's basically the last person who's not one of the people in the showmance to get up. And she goes out with $15,000 left on the clock. So at that point, it's like there's too much money there going out. But at the same time, though, too, it feels like such an egregious sabotage too. You know, like I feel like would the mole wait that long? Like I feel like for me, the sweet spot would be like with 5 or 4 people still left in, because now you're giving them the opportunity to make the sabotage. You've kind of already done your part. $15,000 seems like it's a lot. Um, the other thing too, episode 3, she tries to bluff 10K out of the pot in the fortune cookie mission, but she does a great job lying. I think we've shown here that Muna is a fantastic liar, but she still gets caught and sussed out and removed from the table, so that plot doesn't go over. Episode 4, the only thing I really saw here is that she took money out of the pot to go watch Sean's video, and she gets viewed by Deanna, which again we've already discussed earlier that Deanna's been sussing Muna this whole time. It tracks there. Nothing else Muna did that episode really made me feel like she was the mole here. Even episode 5, she seemed like she was very happy when everybody was suspecting her to be the mole, and she also pushed Michael. So at that point, I'm kind of like, okay, well, she's happy to be the mole. She's pushing the person who is the correct answer at this point. No, I trust Muna here. I don't know if I believe it's Muna here. Um, then she also has the moment after Niche takes the money, where, and I think this is probably the number one reason why I don't think it's her, because her reaction here, where she's like, I don't even want to look at him, and she literally picks up her desk and hops it out of the way to turn her back to him when he walks up, and then hops back. I'm just like, this would be like it's kind of like a Hannah thing. Like it's so petty, it's so emotional. It's such a real reaction. I feel like that I don't think she's the mole here. Um, but I'd say the second batch of episodes, they kind of sprinkle in a little bit here and there that she could be the mole. I think they were trying to end, especially episode 8, with the possibility that she could be the mole, based on the fact that she missed the key, as you kind of talked about earlier here. They also bring up here too that Muna is always the last person to show up to breakfast, and I think they're trying to imply here that maybe she's always late. She's getting like notes from production or whatever, which would make sense. I could see that. And they do kind of sometimes like to have the mole have like a running gag. Like sometimes I remember one season the mole was the person they didn't enter their name into the computer at all, because why they never took the quiz. There's other things too, but there'll be like motifs on certain numbers. They like to do the running gags. So if that was one of the mole clues that she was always the last person everywhere, would be hilarious. Again, I don't believe it. Too many of her other actions she did here, like she said yes to the money to bring Q back, which I think makes perfect sense because she wants the money here. She initially in the negotiation task really wanted the money until she realized there was no way that Sean was going to not take the exemption, and basically at that point you take the exemption to save yourself. She was also one of the first people to unlock the detonator with Hannah. There's just a lot of things that Muna has done that just it makes me feel like she takes the opportunities when they present themselves, but I don't see her being that girl. You know, I don't see her being the mole. She would be a fantastic mole. I would love it. But I do think Muna is a player, and hopefully my winner pick. I'm just gonna put it out there. Amuna is my hopeful winner pick. If not, she's definitely going down as fan favorite. And we also had another theory that we were kind of talking about with how they kind of cut off the episodes. And it would kind of make sense if, for whatever reason, Muna was to be eliminated in this double, that they waited until this point to, to wait. So she has a little bit more time in the finale. So we're still kind of invested in going into the episodes if we're rooting for her, only to see her get cut, a few episodes in, but at that point you're already watching it, you're going to finish it up. So it's giving me very much so Boston Rob energy from Deal or No Deal Island here when it comes to Muna. And I'm hoping that's not the case. I would love to see Muna as our winner. I just don't think she's our mole here. Doug, what are your thoughts here on Miss Muna?
Ah, I feel like at the beginning she had some sabotage, like with cutting the raft too short, even though it's like it was obviously not gonna be big enough for it. Which, going with the raft, I do think that I do remember, I think Michael was one that took out like the barrel of the raft to sabotage it, which they didn't really show because they were saying either him or Tony, and they didn't show and either of them owning up to it. I thought that was kind of interesting. But I really haven't gotten too much sus from Muna. She's been gotten kind of a lot gung ho with getting the money, so. But then maybe always think that with this type of cast, maybe the mole doesn't have to do anything, and that they can just look at like as a player and try to go for the money, and let everyone else try to sabotage because they're trying to be looking like the mole.
Did they actually show Michael take the barrel out?
They were saying it was either Tony or Michael because they were right there, but they never told us or showed us who it was.
I'm wondering if that one, because I feel like there's a lot of talk about that particular mission too, in that moment, and there's a lot of people that I think they make a good point that I don't think the mole would just do such a blatant. Like same reason why I don't think the mole is the person that takes the exemption for the whole amount of money out of the pot. They're not going to do something that's that blatant, especially that early. I feel like when Cassie started blatantly throwing money away, she waited to the very end, right? Like when there's like 3, 4 people left. They're not going to do it episode 1, episode 2, and I don't think they ever labeled who exactly sabotaged it. I remember Andy specifically was like, one of them on the raft has the best opportunity to do it, but like I feel like the sabotage would be leading up to it. So that's why Muna looks more suspicious to me in that sort of situation, because she was the one that suggested to shorten the raft, which would sabotage the raft building process, versus just going out there and just randomly like pulling out a barrel. Like that's a lot, you know? That seems a little dramatic, a little something. It's something you can't really pre-plan for. Like production has the mole. I feel like that's why certain things that the mole does, like you have to look at the sabotages. It's like, okay, is this like specific to the mission? Is this something like if you had like knowledge prior to it, could you have done it? That's why I don't think that would work because you don't have prior knowledge that how the raft will be constructed to know that you need to like pull something out at the very end. So um, that's my opinion on that, but I don't know. Who knows? Um, Jack, what are your thoughts here on Miss Muna?
Okay, so I think Muna is clearly supposed to be like the fan favorite who we're all rooting for from the editor's standpoint, and I love her. I think that everything she does is very smart. I think it's tactical. I don't think she's done anything that's been like too sus, that's like crazy. As far as reasons for her, possibly, she's in the first challenge in the first group. She doesn't do anything that episode that's like too shady, because that first group looked like it had almost no chance of getting someone. But she does end up taking $5,000 from the group pot so she can get a correction. But on the first episode, she makes it very clear that why she is here. She's here for her family. Her family is not in the best financial position. And if she could just give them a decent amount of money, she could really change their lives in a way that's very different than everyone else's experience here. She's one of the most, I thought, like, drawn out or explained characters throughout this show. Like, I don't mean to say she's a character, but like she has her her background really like focused on. I would say that interestingly enough, she is the first person to reveal to be safe, but I'm not sure that that means anything about her being the mole, or more so about like we're all excited that we get to see her again. I think it was just a great way to like get us kind of excited because she's the first one that we get to really see do anything kind of sabotagey. She kind of gives us main character vibes at the very beginning of the show, even in episode 2. Um, she it kind of you kind of know that she's probably going to be there for a while, or it feels that way. She's on the raft team just because she chooses to be on the raft team. I think maybe she knows she's maybe not the strongest swimmer, and the smashing rock team was like all the boys, and they kind of just decided with Niche just telling people where they'd be. And I think Mino was like, I'm not gonna let this man like tell me where I'm gonna go. I'm gonna do it myself. So I don't think she does anything really shady here. Like, yes, she talks about cutting the raft, which is smart to lose like balance, I guess. But it's also, when you think about it, like there was that whole issue with Andy using too much rope, and maybe this was her way of like not specifically telling them that like, hey, we have to use less rope, but maybe she was just very concerned about like how much they could get done in the amount of time they had, especially since none of them were really great at building anything. And maybe she believed that only certain stalks of bamboo would work. And for the most part, the raft actually does a really good job, surprisingly. Um, it's not till that very end that it starts to lose its balance. And I'm not sure if it's anyone specifically sabotaging it. I will note that like Muna is kind of near the front, but when I was watching, she didn't really seem like she was close enough to do anything. And neither, I don't really see that Michael or Ryan or anyone did anything like that. I really think that maybe it just was some of the ropes not being well enough. I mean, it's possible that maybe Muna or someone else in the group like maybe made some of the ropes a little less tight. But I will say that the most sus thing is that Muna waits till the very end. But again, she shares with us and everyone there that she needs this money, and so she's like very afraid of losing it. And I think that was her way of trying to get people to leave. But when she realizes the pot's going to drain to zero, she leaves, and she's like, you know what, screw it, you guys can have it, but I can't lose this money for my family because they'd be so disappointed in me. By episode 3, we see her in the second group. We see her not really have much of an active role in this group, other than she finds the safe easily. But I felt like it was kind of obvious because Ari told us that it was in the bedroom. Ari told us that so like we knew it was going to be in like the master bedroom. And she was like, girl, if you've seen a spy movie, you know it's behind a picture on a wall or something. So she immediately finds it. I think that was pretty smart. But that's about all that happens. And then she probably brings up that the other team kind of left early, and maybe this is a tactic to get some of the attention away from her. But clearly, she's kind of the first kind of mole suspect because of her first episode's, I guess, sabotage, if you will, to get the correction. Because at that point, everyone's kind of looking at either her, Tony, or Deanna, and I think everyone realizes that Muna is a very defensive person at times. As someone who kind of gets loud myself at times, I feel like I have some mutual there with her, but like I understand. And so I think Muna just became a really easy target for everyone to kind of look at. And it's kind of interesting that all of us are looking at her. I feel like she made it really obvious she was lying during the fortune cooking challenge, and she was either second or fourth to come out and say that she had a certain value of money. But so did most of the people who were lying. Like no one, I don't think anyone really came out and was like, "Oh, I have the money first." If they actually have the exemption. Other than that, on episode 4, she doesn't really have much of a deterrent in the back of house challenge. She's really, when she's in the back of the house, she like does her job. She finds the 3 people's cards immediately. She's like, they ordered red wine, they have a peanut allergy, and they don't, and they're vegetarians, so they have to have the vegetable dumplings. Like, she's really trying to put money in that pot. And then, you know, she I think she's just constantly like either a narrator for us or a constant like someone we're like learning more about because we're all kind of rooting for her. And then in episode 5, the only thing that really happens is she votes for Michael, which is the correct choice, but everyone seems to be sure that Muna is the right vote. I don't think that Muna did anything wrong or bad in this challenge. So in episode 6, she's on the water team. She figures out the sequences. She proves that she's smart and she's valuable to the team. She's constantly trying to make money, which I'm not sure if I was good at puzzles, I would constantly be showing everyone I was really good at them. But she is. And then she proves it again in the next episode when she's with Hannah and they figure out their case like almost immediately. The only thing here that's kind of suspect is that her and Hannah are so eager with the other team of Niche, Sean, and Deanna to make sure that like, hey, we'll forego the clue that we have because we don't even know if the team of Michael and Ryan are ever going to get on comms, and we'll just go ahead and have you guys cut $10,000 off. But everyone was kind of on board with that. I don't know if it was all her kind of thing, but there's a lot less sus coming for Muna, in my opinion, in these last couple episodes especially. And then finally in the last challenge, we see the only really sus thing that Muna did is technically not finding the second key. And the one thing I will note about this is that she finds the first key. Sean says, don't we need another key? And Muna says no. But again, Michael and Hannah and Sean are all with her. So like, even if Sean thought they needed another key, he didn't really press the issue much, and Hannah and Michael kind of just went along with it. And Muna is the only person to go into the back part of the house at first, where everyone else was standing at the front or outside trying to find it on the railings or whatnot going on. So I really haven't seen Muna as like this huge mole target. Like she was our initial mole suspect, just I think to throw off all of the viewers. But I kind of see her as like the least likely person of being the mole. I would love to see a world where Muna wins because I feel like they've kind of wanting us to root for Muna. But I do think she's the most likely person to get cut during this double elimination, just because I think she is still probably on the Michael train, and I'm kind of leaning against Michael being the mole. But I could be wrong. I could be wrong. But I don't see a good chance of Muna making it out because I think there's a high likelihood that Hannah either gets a correction or the exemption. But, I mean, we'll have to find out.
Yeah, I do think that Muna and Hannah, when they had their little arc about them being friends, I feel like this could be a situation where maybe they're actually technically rivals for possibly who could be the winner here. So, pulling for Muna, but like you said there, if she goes out in this double, would not be super surprised here. But still pulling for Miss Mooney here. Let's talk about our next suspect because I think our last two are probably two we're gonna have a lot to say about here. Because for me, Miss Ryan, our 33-year-old volleyball coach and mother, this girl, I have a lot to say about Ryan here. Either she's definitely the mole, or she's got to be one of the most boring TV personalities I think we've ever had on the show. Like, and that's fine. Not everybody is meant to be on reality TV. Not everyone on reality TV is meant to be super exciting. You do kind of need those quieter personalities to, at least make the bigger ones kind of seem more exciting. I feel like sometimes, but I cannot get any sort of sense of semblance of what Ryan's personality really is. She's just so quiet, I feel like, that either it makes me feel like she's super serious and into the game, but then there's other times where it just seems like she's like very aloof and doesn't really like care what she's doing. And then there's other times where I'm just like, is this all just calculated? Because there are some very strange things that Ryan has done. And unlike other people, we don't get any sort of explanations on it because Ryan doesn't really get very much confessional time, I feel like. Um, let's just run through Ryan's sus behaviors because there's a lot of them here. Episode 1, I will say, 1 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 episode 1, I will nothing really happened here. Outside of the fact that there was that whole final shot with her making she had one paintball left. There was one intruder, and it miraculously happened that she hit them. Um, I know a lot of people are like, well, she did that to make people think that she's less sus, but I'm like, I still find this whole setup of events very difficult to actually have happen unless she actually had maybe more than 10 paintballs. Maybe she had, and they were just lying about how many she actually was firing or what. So, unless Miss Ryan is a trained paintball professional, she could be. She's a volleyball coach. Clearly, she's athletic. And as we find out in episode 2, she's also she's a strong swimmer for the most part. And why I find her whole actions during this treasure hunt very sus to me is because she's very clearly physically able to at least get down to the raft. She gets down there a couple times. First off, by the way, too, she's also the one that suggests everybody in her group split up to go look for this raft, which was smart to cover more ground. But also at the same time, too, it felt like it was taking a long time to get. I don't know. It felt like there were better ways to make this happen. Anyway, when she finally gets to it, she makes one real good effort to get down there, comes nowhere close to the raft, and then decides, oh, I can't do anything for the rest of it because my ears hurt, they're going to explode, then proceeds to stall and waste a bunch of time while Michael is trying to get it by himself. Eventually, Ryan decides, you know what, let's go one more time here because Melissa and Hannah clearly aren't doing shit. So she finally decides to make yet another hero move to go down and get the chest with Michael. So she stalled for a very long time until she decided to do that. So also, she's one of the people that waited till towards the very end to get out of Countdown. She left when there was $20,000 left on the clock, which was, again, probably around the sweet spot where you'd want to leave. You don't want to be one of the last people. She's not taking all the blame, but she drained a bunch of money out of that clock there. She also, in episode 3, I don't really feel like she's contributing very much here too, but she does go along with Nisha's idea that they need to open the clue, which costs $5,000 from their team. She also, for some reason, decides to bluff out $20,000 during the fortune cookie mission, which is insane to me that you're going to go for that much money to try to get yourself an exemption. So, like, that is also suspect to me. There's also the fact that she views Sean's video during the movie night mission and no one looks at her, which is sus that no one looks at her, number one. And number two, the fact that she is one of the people that bring or looks at Sean's video. I don't know if we ever got sus or Ryan, whatever reason why she's going for Sean. I'm still kind of confused why people went for Sean this early, um, other than maybe just who he is and what it's like the general kind of vibe he gives off. But it would make sense that Ryan would want to look at Sean's video, especially since they're clearly not making any effort to hide his undercover cop storyline thing here. And if it's something that they're trying to do to get like more people like out there and suspect on him, especially from the audience, it would make sense that she would want to see Sean because this undercover cop storyline has been a huge part of the narrative here. So as far as everything goes here, I feel like she would probably want to go see his video over everybody else's as far as that goes. She also blatantly calls out the wrong order for one of the pilots in the Gala mission, which sends the group looking for the wrong person. And again, unlike Sean's sabotage, which we've kind of talked about a few times here, and which we'll talk about again when we get to Sean, Ryan got no confessional about why she just called out randomly the wrong name. Like, Sean at least got to justify himself. Instead, we hear nothing from Ryan why she did it. Instead, we hear from Hannah being like, this is some game-changing information that she just, picked up on. So that scene to me has still felt very weird in the whole canon of this whole show. Like, it feels like one of those moments we're going to see back on finale night when they pull out all the sus from the mole and the sabotage. I feel like this is going to be one of them when they pull that out there. So that just all seems very weird to me. Also, episode 5. Another thing that kind of stood out to me is when Ryan said she did not vote for any of the suspects to be the mole. And I get it because she does have this kind of persona to her that she's keeping her game tight-lipped. But also at the same time, too, if you're the mole, you're not taking the quiz. So of course you didn't vote. So of course she's not going to just throw a name out there because she didn't vote for anybody because she didn't actually take the quiz. But she does also suggest to not put all the money into one container too, which also guarantees at that point that they're not going to get all $50,000 if they're splitting everything up. So thought it was smart that she was able to justify that and push the group in that direction, especially if she's the mole. Episode 6, she also said no to Q coming back, which the reasoning why she said it both makes sense and doesn't make sense from her perspective. And it makes more perspective, or it makes sense from the perspective of the mole, because if her whole reasoning is that she doesn't want someone to come back because they know too much, well, it does make sense as a player to some degree, but as a player, when you're eliminated, you only know the answers you picked. You don't know the answers that everybody else picked, so you don't know really where you landed in the skew of things. So, like, at the end of the day, you could have literally picked the right person as the mole. It just so happens everybody else could have done so too, or their answers are spread out in a way that allowed them to just get 1 point better than you. So, I don't think that's necessarily that big of a deal as a player to come back, but it could eliminate people if, and you could be worried about that if you're the mole. So, also a little questionable as far as that goes. The more money she's taking out of the pot. She also lets Niche again pick the wrong answers, and then goes along with Hannah's idea to spite Niche to pick the fish idol, getting more money out of the pot. Episode 7, she attaches herself to Michael. Then her and Michael obviously flop that mission as well too. And again, between her and Michael, neither of them are speaking up as to who exactly did what. Is one of them covering for the other because they know the other is the mole? That seems to be the storyline that we're kind of getting, because it seems like Ryan susses Michael, but it also would make sense here if from her storyline, because I mean, if Michael is staying around this long, she needs a suspect and someone to also go after. So if Sean's sussing Michael, she's on the game too. If there's like a Ryan, Sean, Michael final three, by the way, would not surprise me. Anyway, we also have so they blow up the bomb, lose a bunch of money there. Episode 8 as well too, and I think this is the moment where it felt blatantly that Ryan was the mole for me here, because this whole entire time that they're in this box, her and Deanna, she does not make one damn suggestion. She waits for Deanna to basically do everything first, or if Ryan does do something, it's something completely useless. Like she takes the pole and tries to open the window, but instead of opening the window from the right side, she tries to open the side with the hinges on it. It's like, girl, what are you doing? Like, the fact that Deanna is that blind and not calling it out, insane to me here too. She also really lags a lot on the phone. She notoriously says the Big Ben statue instead of the clock. And the thing that I also found the biggest sus out of all of it is as soon as they realize that the group is there and they need to get themselves out, what does Ryan notice? Key on the other side of the room. And now she magically figures out too that, or she also magically finds the hook that they need to get to. It's like, oh, okay, well, clearly you're trying to get them to get money in this pot here, so you look like a hero again at the very end. When this is this is stuff that you literally had at your fingertips the whole entire time. Why are you just now pulling this shit out of your ass when like, like you she's just the master of stalling, and it's just it's the only, it feels like the only person that's consistently doing things, and she's also not pointed out in the edit here too, and I'm just very convinced that there's no way these people figured out who the mole is that quickly. So that's why Ryan is my pick. No, she's my number one. I can't really justify a lot of anything here, especially the fact that it feels like, honestly, like, again, editing wise, she has no story. So if she does happen to get eliminated in this double, it would make sense because she has no story up to this point, so she could just be kind of picked out at any point. But again, it just also makes sense she has no story because she's the mole, so she doesn't really need that much of a story. They could kind of just, again, oh, I'm sussing Michael while she's here doing all this shit going around. So I don't know. I'm very sus of Ryan. I just, there's so many things she's doing I cannot get over. So um, I think she could be my top suspect here for the mole. Jack, tell us about your thoughts on Miss Ryan here.
Okay, so Miss Ryan kind of comes into this game, not much focus on her, and she's in my top 2 of probably who I think the mole is going to be. She is in the third area on the first challenge. She eliminates 2 of the 5 people, technically 2 of the 4 that were left for her to eliminate, and supposedly with one bullet left, kind of seems sus. So that's like a good reason she could be kind of like the mole here, because she actually makes a pretty good name for herself. She quote unquote saves Niche from being eliminated and being replaced. But something else that strikes out is we hear about her having a backstory of like being a stay-at-home mom. So she has some connection with Sean because he's supposedly a stay-at-home dad. But both of them kind of give the exact same energy to me, where I'm thinking this whole time that I'm like, neither of them seem like they're just this. Like her being a volleyball coach, stay-at-home mom, I'm not so sure about it. Also, Ryan hasn't seemed like the most athletic person. She doesn't seem unathletic per se, but she doesn't seem the most like together. That being said, she does do probably the best in the next challenge in the shipwreck. She's very, very like, I need to get this money. We need to get this money as a team. She tries. She says she's 5'2", and that's the reason she can't really reach the ship as easily. She, as you mentioned, she does talk about like spreading out. And on the map, though, she mentions it's basically a straight line from the raft to where the shipwreck is supposed to be per the map. So she's not really sure why Hannah and Melissa kind of suck, and so does Michael at finding the shipwreck. And I think she is the one that ends up finding the shipwreck as well. She could have been stalling a little bit, I guess, but I didn't really get that. I didn't really get that idea from her because I saw that like she kind of had a struggle with the fact that her teammates kind of sucked. I felt like she kind of led them well, and she was like really concerned about getting to that box. So I was kind of not viewing her very much first. Like she doesn't get too much time, but she does tell us like in her confessional that she's like, I don't get why my team is taking so long. I'm suspect of suspect of Michael, which to me could also be a reason she's still here. Is maybe she just had like a really good, if Michael ends up being it, maybe she's just seen him from the beginning and kind of been like going his way, which would kind of explain how she's still here, even without like a good storyline. Like maybe she's just really perceptive on that, and it was a good time. She does stay one of the longest in the exemption challenge, the first one. I don't know if that means anything, but it is kind of interesting that most of the people who stayed longer are still in the show. But she leaves. She's fourth from the end, I guess. In episode 3, she's in the group of the team that actually gets the money. She agrees to open the clue that gives nothing. If she's the mole, if she's the sabotaging here, taking half the money out is a great strategy. And then it came down to a 50-50. Maybe they still won't get it anyways. So like, it's really subtle. It'd be a great way to sabotage without really doing anything crazy. So I mean, it is good. It is a good like look for her if she is that. Other than that, she brings up like really good points. She is willing to risk the $20,000, I think, for the fortune cookie. But she also brings up the point with Muna that the other team left the area so early, and so Ryan is constantly like slowly be showing us that she has ideas about like maybe the moles on the other team, and kind of casting some doubt on anyone who might even consider her a mole. She claims an idea that she wants to go against Tony in the fortune cookie, which is why she's willing to sacrifice 20,000. I don't think it's out of the ordinary to want to sacrifice so much money, because she is again like just coming off that the time where Hannah and Tony basically took up the full pot. But it was a good strategy. It's smart, and it shows that she's thinking more than maybe what she shows to the other team mates that she's had. But what kind of doesn't make sense, if she is so smart, is how she's done in some of the other challenges. For example, she sabotaged or just mistook that pilot in the fourth episode challenge where they're doing the front of house, back of house. They're trying to find that Castriona, but Ryan just randomly doesn't see that someone on her table had the wrong appetizer. Like, that's kind of strange. And she lies about the vegetable dumpling. So is it that she's just sabotaging here? Is it that she didn't see it for real? But we never really get an answer from Ryan in the confessionals, which you brought up, and I think that's a really important point as to like why she could be the mole. But then in episode 5, right after this, she ends up saying that she hasn't voted for Shawn, Michael, or Muna for the crate challenge. And if in the crate challenge she was the mole, she would know that Michael is the person for that they need to put the money on. So maybe she waited because so many other people already said they voted for Muna and or Michael, that she was like, if I just don't vote, I still don't look that sus, but I can still kind of sabotage by not making anything happen here. So she might be lying. We don't really know at this point, but it kind of sounds like she's sus. But at the same time, she's the one that says, hey, we need to hedge our bets and split the money at least somewhat. So that kind of covers her tracks in that scenario. Then in episode 6, she votes against Q. It kind of makes sense because she doesn't want him having an advantage. If she's actually a player, she should want money in the pot, but it makes sense that she doesn't think she can make it to the end against someone who has such a big advantage. It's kind of hard to like justify if this is like the best play for anyone, because all the men plus her vote against Q and everyone else votes for Q. So it's kind of hard to, express it. And she's the only person that's not really happy about him coming back. When it happens, she's the only one not clapping or saying anything nice to him about anything. And I don't know if this is just Ryan's personality. I kind of liked it. I kind of was like, yeah, I'd be stank faced too if it happened to me. I'd be like, no, I don't want to. I will say the one thing that was kind of sus on the next challenge for her is that she does end up on the river team. She hears that Hannah thinks it's 40 for the last puzzle, and everyone thinks it's 40 except for Ryan. So it was like maybe Ryan was trying to just say no, but then she didn't really want to stand on that because like she didn't want to seem sus. But she also agrees with Michael, or I'm sorry, she also goes against Niche and goes with Michael and Hannah to take the fish. And she doesn't do anything about the totem fight because she's just like really this person who doesn't really bring up things. She always seems to be more of a follower, which is a really great place to be as the mole, even if it makes you seem really sus. And we kind of see that in episode 7 where her and Michael are on a team together again, and neither of them can quote unquote figure out how to do this challenge, how to get to 6 liters in this tin, or how to get this balance. And they wait till the end, and it's like she's blaming him, but she also thinks that he was struggling genuinely with it. So she's still kind of on this fence of like, is she still on the Michael train because we know she watched Shawn's video at one point. There's a lot of like back and forth with her. Like it seems a little contradictory, but like we don't really see what she sees, I guess, because the show is edited to some point. And she does agree with Michael at the end, but Michael's screaming at her to cut the blue wire, and so she does. And she doubles down on she didn't understand what they were saying. So this is a good spot to be in as the mole, but it could also just be that it was really poorly communicated, which it did kind of seem like the other teams did suck at that. That being said, later in that episode, she wants Shawn to go for the negotiation, and she brings up the fact that Shawn is a cop, which I think is just like an interesting thing that she said, because Hannah is shocked. Hannah didn't know this information. Hannah was like, wait, what? Say what? And so Ryan blurts this out. This is a really good disguise to make Hannah not trust Shawn. It makes her seem like she's not as shady, because she's probably not thinking about why Ryan withheld this information. She's probably just more like concerned, why did Ryan withhold this information? But we know that she watched his video, and he's been lying to them. But she's maybe this is just a subtle way of her like keep the focus on anyone else other than me, but she wants the exemption. She doesn't want the money in the pot, which at this point it kind of makes sense because it's top 7. And then finally in this last episode, she's selected randomly with Deanna, And it seems like she's not the best at figuring out, but all of a sudden she wasn't terrible at getting the key. It seems like it's kind of on the fence about Ryan's background still, because I feel like they haven't really told us a lot about her, so I'm not really sure if she was randomly selected or maybe she is the mole. I mean, in the first season, we saw a challenge very similar to this, and the mole was actually on the search team, but this time maybe the mole is on the need to be saved team. But Ryan is better on the phone, in my opinion. Like, yes, she does say Big Ben statue, but I think it kind of, I don't know if that's enough sus for me to be on the Ryan train constantly. And then I think that one of the other things we see is that at the end of the episode, when they're picking who should go for the lunch date with Ari, Ryan waits till everyone else votes again, and then she puts her 2 cents in and is like, okay, I will also vote with Hannah because 3 people have already said Hannah at this point, so I can just say Hannah and I don't have to deal with any consequences of my actions. And this has been a common occurrence for her as not being like the person to step up immediately. So it still fits her narrative. She hasn't had as much storyline as you mentioned, but maybe it's because there isn't much to give, or maybe she's about to be like taken out of the running, because I feel like if Ryan goes on, she has a high likelihood of being the mole. If she doesn't go on and she gets eliminated here in this double elimination, it's an easy person to eliminate because I don't think we're very invested in her, and I don't think anyone's invested other than thinking she might be the mole. So Ryan's up there, but she's not my number 1 suspect. She's probably my number 2 suspect.
I mean, justifiably, very justifiable, and I can kind of see it too. That's my only kind of um, hesitation with going completely in on Ryan is that I just feel like we don't know her, and I feel like we kind of generally get to know them all. So I'm a little still a little hesitant. I like I said, I think my top 3. I think one of them is probably the mole, but um, I get it. I get why you have her at number 2. Doug, what are your thoughts here on Miss Ryan?
Oh boy, I think now with all these episodes, I think Ryan has jumped to my number 1 suspect with from the sabotage at the gala, which we didn't get to see anything, to her and Michael sabotaging the wire challenge, which it seemed very clear that they were trying to go with Blue, and that Hannah has been around still. She keeps on saying around, and she knows about the Ryan thing, but we haven't heard anything about it. So I'm assuming maybe if Ryan is the mole, we'll probably hear her talk about that or bring it up at the very end as like oh, I knew this, that none of y'all got caught.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of ways it could go here. Um, do you have any other final thoughts here with Miss Ryan before we move on to our last subject here, Doug?
Yeah, and then we also had with the crates her talking about splitting the money between different crates, which would, as a mole, guarantee that they wouldn't get the entire 50K. And then being able to put the multiplier into Muna, who you would know that's not who the mole is, or the number 1 is. That would be another way to guarantee they don't get that much money.
Very smart point. I didn't even consider the doubler. I totally forgot that that existed. You're right. Yeah, I see Miss Ryan. I'm looking at you. If she doesn't go, I think you're right, Jack. If she doesn't go out at the start of this next episode, I think we could be looking at our mole here. But um, who knows? Honestly, she could just be an unedited, easy elimination in this double that we have coming up. Because I can honestly see a world where like maybe Ryan and like Hannah or Ryan or Muna go out, where we lose like a fan favorite or someone that they've developed a lot, and then someone that we don't know at all. So who knows? Who knows? But let's get to our final suspect of the 6 here. Another one that has been very controversial this entire season, and that is Sean, our 42-year-old stay-at-home dad and retired undercover cop. And that undercover cop storyline has really been a feature in his storyline here, to the point where it's made me question, would production really go all in on an undercover cop? Is that too obvious of someone to kind of go with? Or is this a situation here where they're actually going to try for the double bluff? And I feel like that's everything that has to do with Sean's edit. And that's partially why I have a hard time really gauging where Sean is, because Sean gets a lot of time to explain a lot of his thoughts. I think he gets more time than Michael to explain his thoughts, but a lot of the time I feel like his thoughts are basically he has the same strategy as Michael, where he's trying to just make it look like he's the mole. So he's constantly justifying everything, all his acts of sabotage, behind this wall of trying to make people think he's the mole. And I'm having a real hard time trying to figure out if I think he's genuine, because there's part of me just kind of just based off the way he acts, just who he is as a person, that makes me kind of actually believe that he's being genuine. But then there's times where he gets like super serious in a few moments here, where I'm just like, wow, okay, he does have these like acting chops. He does have the ability to lie. He can possibly do this if he wants to. Um, but I'm just trying to figure out if he's much like Michael here, doing it because he's the mole, or doing it because his strategy is to make people think he's the mole. And we kind of run through some of his more sketchy moments here, which basically is every single episode here. Episode 1, he's part of Zone 1, again, another person in the Slingshot group that can't do anything. Episode 2, he's part of the raft building team. And honestly, I feel like he didn't really do too much here. I don't remember really too much sabotage he did, other than the fact that he did agree with Muna that they should shorten the raft. He also, in the countdown clock mission, left at 25k left in the group here, being what top 5, top 4, leaving people left over. So still, he left. He took quite a bit of change out before he decided to make a move here. Episode 3, again, I think begins the Sean real sus arc here, as he has to rappel. He's chosen as the team leader for his group, and he has to rappel down the side of the hotel. And he eats up a lot of time for his team, saying that he's afraid of heights. And he eventually does it, then eventually goes down like really fast, which is kind of weird. But then he also encourages Hannah to put in the wrong codes, and he doesn't really help his team out at all during this hotel mission. He also tries to bluff 10k out of the pot during the fortune cookie mission for an exemption, which, again, a large amount of money that he tries to take out, and he is almost convincing to some degree, but they do eventually suss him out and take him out. Episode 4, he takes the $5,000 out of the pot to go view Hannah's video, and also gets viewed by Michael, Muna, and Ryan. In the gala mission, as we kind of already talked about here, he notices that Michael is kind of onto him, so he does the very blatant turn the photo around of one of the donors, and it turns out one of the people that he removes from the board is the right person. And that, to me, feels very, very, very sus, because he's getting to justify this action. And like, there's so many people on this board. There's like 6 people at a table, 10 tables. That's 60 people. You're looking for 3 people. I don't know what the odds are of that. I don't know how many photos they'd already turned around. Maybe half to this at this point. But the odds of him just randomly, just at random, just going up to the table, that board, pulling off a photo, and it being one of the right ones, the odds are so low of that happening. That it's just, who knows? It could just be a coincidence. But this will be the coincidence that it's gonna lead me astray if Sean is the mole, or it's gonna be the thing that points to him being the mole, the one that he did pick off, and with all those chances was one of those people. So I can't figure out if this is luck or if it's legitimate that it happened here, because he justifies this all with the whole, I'm doing this because Michael's watching me. But like the fact that he gets it like right on the nose here, very sus, extremely sus, almost as sus as Ryan calling out the wrong order, and no one catching that either. So between these two, Sean's feels like it's justified, but I feel like they also justify a lot of his actions here, which I can't tell if they're doing that because he's legitimately a player and they're really justifying his actions here, or if he's the mole and they're just trying to, undersell what he's doing as the mole. Episode 5. He realizes again Michael is his target, same thing that Michael does when trying to distract attention away from Sean. Sean distracts attention away from Michael. Problem is here again, Michael is the right answer. So him distracting the money away from Michael hurts the group again with this whole strategy that he's using. So another thing where it's like between him and Michael, Sean's sabotages are very much so blatantly taking money out of the pot. Michael's aren't as much. Episode 6, he says no to Q returning and then lies and says yes, that he wants him to get in. It has a very, very, again, convincing moment where he literally is pulling on Q's heartstrings here. And another moment was just very sus that Sean can lie if he wants to. But again, is this him just having skills from being an undercover cop? I don't know. I don't know where to go with this. Episode 7. Oh wait, sorry. Also, episode 6, he picks the wrong idol. He wants to go for the wrong idol, but his team outvotes him. I think that's something with episode 6, 7, and 8 that he's doing here is that I feel like people are catching on to him subtly sabotaging, taking like clues or pushing towards clues. Because episode 7, he basically is trying to get people to take the clue during the firearm mission. In episode 8, he's trying to get them to make calls so that way they could take money subtly out of the pot. It's just all these small things that he's doing, and he's justifying it again by saying that he wants people to suss him, but also at the same time he's not being as successful as he wants to be in some of these, and that's why, like, between the two, is Michael more successful with all of his sabotages? Yes, but Sean is doing more, and his sabotages somewhat feel a little bit more, again, justified or based off of like information you wouldn't have beforehand, I guess, to some degree. So that's why Sean is slightly above Michael for me. Sean is my number 2. Kind of honestly, now that I'm thinking about it again, I'm going back and forth with Ryan here too. Sean Ryan, Sean Ryan, Sean Ryan. I don't know. I don't know. Doug, what are your thoughts here on Ryan or Sean?
I feel like Sean is kind of too like sabotaging in public too much to be the mole, but then what if the mole wants to like try to be all out in the open to make people like, oh, they're definitely trying to make us think they're the mole, so they're not the mole, and trying to do double a double blow, where it's like he's been openly sabotaging a lot, but I feel like the sabotages are a little too like obvious for him to be the mole.
Like it's very like there's certain things like you're saying they do seem very obvious, like him taking money out of the clues or the money out of the pot, but I still can't get over him taking that wrong photo off the thing. I cannot.
Yeah.
I cannot do that. I
Yeah,
can't
it's like,
justify that.
I feel like that could have just been by not knowing, but then he knowingly does it in front of Michael as the thing. So like, why would he do it if he knew about it in front of Michael? Unless he wants Michael to think that, oh, he's acting like a mole, so he's not the mole type of thing.
Right? It's this whole Sean being the mole. Like I said, it feels like it's coming down to the most whimsical double bluff. Like I would have to write a script for him to become the mole. But I also can see it happening here. I don't. It feels so far fetched, but also kind of plausible. Jack, give us his rundown here on Sean, because I have a feeling he might be high up on your list based off what I heard tonight.
Yes. Yes. Okay, Sean from J1 has been my number 1 suspect to be the mole, and I'm staying true to that, even if I'm wrong and I look stupid, whatever. So, Sean comes in episode 1. I already don't like the guy. I'm like, something isn't right about you. I'm not sure what it is initially, but then we find out he's an undercover cop. I'm like, this is like a great identity to have. And wouldn't it be so interesting if they obviously put out who the mole was in front of us? Like, what if we just knew who the mole was right away? And like for some reason, we just kind of have this perfect suspect, but he acts too crazy to make it like well known. Well, something that Sean does immediately is he doesn't bring up any like information about himself because he wants to keep himself more tight-lipped or whatever. So he doesn't bring up the fact that he was an undercover cop because people will start sussing him. You know, but that's kind of weird because his gameplay kind of becomes more if he wants people to suss him later on. What I guess to me is like really, it's really interesting because these two things kind of collide because they contradict themselves. In the first challenge, if he had been honest, he could have been put on either the sniper team or on the third area where they just had the free range with the paintballs, because he clearly should have a good shot. Like if you're a cop trained, you in theory should have a really good aim. So this is a little sus, but other than that, he doesn't have much going on other than trying to find some I guess common ground with Ryan right off the bat, where he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm a mooch because I'm a stay-at-home dad, and so like I know what that's like, so I mooch off my wife." And it was like, haha, this is your personality, but undercover cops put on fake personalities all the time. Now, whether this is Sean's real personality or it's a character made up, I'm not a fan of him in the like, I'm a fan of him in one way of like, I think he's a decent player and or mole, but I'm not a huge fan of his personality. That being said, there were quite a few people this season I didn't really like their personality. But if we go on further from episode 1, he goes to episode 2, he's on the raft team, he doesn't really seem to add too much to it. He's playing this like, I'm kind of older, he's now besties with Andy right away, which is, I think is kind of interesting. You know, him and Andy are together, he says that Andy's his guy, and he's really friendly and social with everyone. And he doesn't seem to contribute much to this rafting team. He's kind of just going along with it. And I don't really see him do too much until we get to the point where they have to do the exemption challenge. And he is one of the last people to leave. He leaves right about in the middle, right before everyone else who's still kind of in the game here has left. And he leaves and blames it on the fact that Andy is his guy, and if Andy's out, he's out, right? And so it's kind of like, that's a good excuse. And then he tries to talk sense into Hannah and Tony because he sees what's going on, and it seems like he's trying. Gets voted to be for Hannah in that position, and I don't think Michael has the same level of trust. Your boys, what would they do if they were looking up to you right now, blah blah blah. So eventually he does that, but he scales that building really fast for someone who is supposedly afraid of heights. And maybe this because he was just trying to get it done and over with. Maybe he has some kind of experience with getting over his fears from his past training. You know, there's a lot going on here, and I just think it's interesting that Sean puts his name out there for the leader for this challenge. And he even states that he lives in a one-story building for a reason as to why he wouldn't do it and why he's afraid of heights. But in my opinion, I don't know that someone who's so afraid of heights that they don't even have stairs in their house would be able to even get on descending this building. I'm not really sure how he could have just magically been okay at that point and go down so fast. It seems like it might have been just a good way to sabotage just slightly, so that way like nothing happens. And then he's in the group that doesn't find the clue again, and it's really suspect that here he is in the group. He already tried to sabotage. Maybe he sabotages their attempt to get the clue. Q figures it out. Maybe he prevents the clue from being found, and no one even thinks about it. But then he overreacts when the final thing happens in this group. He looks over and he's like shocked when he finds out the other team has a clue, and he's one of the only people that seem to have had a reaction to that, which I found kind of sus. I was like, Are you overacting? What is going on? Sean says he doesn't really believe or trust that Q was really doing anything in the investigation. But again, Sean is also not aware of the fact that Q is the only reason they got the flashlight working. So it's almost like, did Sean say that in confessional and then maybe tell other people about it like later on and be like, hey, I'm not so sure about Q, do. Because the more I think about it, the more Sean's friends have been going home as well. So maybe he's been feeding people misinformation this whole time. Like I said with Andy, Andy goes home. Other people started to go home that were kind of tight with Sean. And so as we're looking past this episode, of which he doesn't contribute much to his team, and then he somehow gets over his fear of heights really easily and doesn't really help them find the code for the safe or do anything special. He's even one of the people that brings up one of the codes that is specifically for his team in the music score, and he doesn't have Q go over there with the flashlight. So I'm not sure how that happened, but it did. Now on episode 4, Sean jumps in during the fortune cookie challenge and does the worst job possible of covering himself and trying to prove that he's not the mole, and like he would never take money out of the pot and he's definitely not got an exemption, and everyone's like, you're lying, you're lying, you're lying. Isn't that such a great moment to have where everyone thinks you're lying supposedly? I don't know, it's weird because now people think Sean isn't a good liar. So they've got all these people who just aren't onto Sean's like ideas. But then when we finally get to the next area where people start taking money out of the pot, Sean's video is super accurate as to how his gameplay would be as the mole. It kind of matches, but he should know that his gameplay is very similar to what he said. So if he knew this was coming up, maybe he makes the idea to change his gameplay. And we see the obvious sabotage in this next challenge right after this, that Sean takes off the girl's picture from the table and replaces it with a different picture, even though he would know as the mole that that's one of the right people. It could just be a coincidence, but out of all of the people there, out of like all 60 people, you end up randomly switching out one of the 3. I don't know, that's kind of strange. And he doesn't care. He doesn't care that it takes off money. He's like, oh well. He hears more about the sabotage, which is really simple because, it seems like he might be doing a double bluff on Michael, which is great because if Sean can get Michael off of his tracks, then maybe it's a good thing. And then further in, the Sean versus Michael storyline keeps going up. In episode 5, Sean lies and says he voted for Muna and not Michael in the last quiz. The votes for Michael were what was needed to get to the money in the right box area, and Sean is one of the 3 names up on the board of who people are most sus of. So he does a really good job of making sure that basically no one is saying his name, and he's making sure that he puts his name on the wrong person, so they're more likely to put more money in that box. And then he even is like, haha, we put like just a little bit of money in my box, but I'm broke just like in real life, ha ha ha. And it's like, oh gosh, this man is a dad, he does dad jokes. Like, he's doing this persona that I don't think is necessarily him, and if it is him, I'm still not a fan of it. But I don't trust him, like I just don't. And this continues like into episode 6, where it's like they're being very like forward with how he would be a good mole, but then he's being very obvious and his actions are constantly being explained in the tutorials. He votes against Q, which was one of his number ones, to come back because he doesn't want Q coming back into the game. And he doesn't want the money in the pot, which is great for the mole. Plus, he can just play it off as if he was like, oh, well, I was trying to do it for the good of the team, and I don't want all of us going home, and I need to save my spot in the game, because clearly, if we get another player back, then it's sus. And now he lies to Q, and he has turned on his number one, but Q is still not sure what to choose or who to pick, and he ends up on a team with Q again in the water team. And on the water river team, he ends up leading everyone to believe one of the clues is wrong. And he's like, oh, there's 36 squares here. And Muna clearly said, I've seen this exact replica before. It is 40 squares. I know what I'm talking about. And Sean starts to point on the board. He's like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, counts up all the squares and is like, see, guys, it's 36. Are we all in agreement? And he leads them to not get that idol, of which he tries to make them also go for the final totem of the fish, but immediately everyone kind of goes against him, and Q eventually agrees with the girls to go for the tiger. This could be a way of Sean overacting, trying to get the wrong thing, but he's also going with that whole it's not the correct totem. We're gonna go for I think it was the bird totem, like foul play because of a bird, and he was just trying to, justify all of his actions even in front of the group of people. Finally, I guess when we get to episode 7, Sean's on a team with Deanna and Niche. And he kind of knows that Niche is really annoying and that Deanna is not been the greatest so far in challenges. And so he kind of doesn't help at all with really figuring things out. And he's like, guys, I just don't know. I have steam coming out of my ears thinking about these math equations, and it's like he's trying to stall their time as opposed to try to help them. And he is really on board as immediately cutting a wire for the other team when they finally figure it out, so that way at least one of their teams is probably going to fail and not get this money. And surprisingly, their team does end up with getting the exact same wire that they know is going to fail, so he can guarantee that the other team gets money. It's a good cover for him. It makes him look like he is purposely trying to put money in the pot. But then later in the episode, he becomes the negotiator. He wants the exemption just like everyone else, and he wants to lie to Muna to get that. He's outed as a cop, and he probably knows that Ryan has watched his video and has been he knows that Ryan knows that he's been lying a lot. So he's probably thinking, okay, how can I reprove my trust and trying to get them off of my tracks? And this is where it leads us to episode 8, where he seems to be in charge of the phone, but I didn't feel like he was trying to call too often. He brought it up a lot, but he was like, I don't know how we would even start anything if we don't have any information. As far as his character goes, though, his character as a dad who is trying to just be social and friendly and do well, he wants to spend the money because he's the more traditional kind of, I go for everything that would help us find people. So he could be slowly taking some money out, but trying to explain away the reasons why he's doing these things. And I wasn't really sussing the reason why he was calling, because they didn't call too often, but he did bring up calling again and again and again, but nothing that was too crazy. But maybe he was trying to seem obvious, like he was taking money away, until he seems to ignore the note. And just like everyone else in his group, when there were supposed to be 2 keys in that house, now he is the one that brings up the fact that he thinks there might be another one there, and no one listens to him. So he has a really good story to once again be like, oh yeah, I was trying, I thought I was doing the right thing. And he's constantly complaining about how he can't catch up and he needs to go catch his breath while they're running around. He's playing this dad bod, I'm not as athletic as I once was storyline. And as far as our final 6 finalists go, he is one of the people that constantly gets to explain his actions and constantly is saying, I want people to think I'm sus, so that way they'll vote for me and they'll get out of the game and I'll still be in it. I think the only person in our final 6 who hasn't directly said that was Ryan and Deanna, and yet he has been. And so it looks like if I was editing, I wouldn't be totally aware that Sean is the mole at this point. So for me, Sean is probably Sean is my number 1. I'm sticking with it. I could be completely wrong. It could be this whole game of Sean versus Michael, and at the end, one of them finally switches off of each other and figures out whoever the third person is. But I think we're guaranteed to see Sean in the finals. Unless he gets eliminated at top 4, I think he will be in the final 3, and he will either be I don't think he's going to win. I think he's either going to be the mole or he's going to be the runner-up. I kind of don't get the energy that he's winning this, but he has had a lot of camera time.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with you. I don't think Sean's our winner either. I definitely could see him be a runner-up. I could also see him being the mole. If it's a guy, I'll be honest, I think it's Sean. If it's a woman, I think it's Ryan. I think that's kind of where I'm at here. Does anybody have any different thoughts here? I know I think you're kind of on the same page too, right, Jack? It's the guy
Yeah,
Ryan, or sorry, guy, it's guy Sean, girl
Sean.
Ryan.
Yep, definitely. That's my thoughts.
What are your
I
thoughts, Doug?
think if it's a guy, it's gonna be Michael.
Okay. But girl, you're still on Ryan, right?
Because I feel like it has to be one of Michael or Ryan because of what happened with the detonation. That they both were like, they both did it, but we don't know who really was sabotaging it. So it's gotta be one of those two because they both heard cut the blue and neither of them did that. They did the opposite.
I agree. That point is very shady, and they're also, I mean, Ryan, Sean, Michael. Between the three of them, they all have some very very sus moments that I'm having some hard times explaining away. Like I said, I feel like Sean always gets to explain away his moments. Michael sometimes does. Ryan never. So it's hard to really kind of judge when they're all kind of being set up in different ways here. So um, as far as everything goes, I think we did a really good job about kind of going through why everybody is kind of sus, why we feel this way. I definitely can still see Amuna, Deanna, or Hannah possibly coming out as the mole here, but I feel like after we've gone through all this, I find it very highly unlikely any of the three of those women are going to be the mole. I think it definitely has to be Ryan, Sean, or Michael. Um, I I'll just lock in. I'm just gonna go full in right now on Orion. But Sean will be my secondary pick. So we'll see how right we are next Friday when everything happens here. And I know I've been slightly complaining about how the season has gone to some degree and how it is slightly confusing to some degree to make an argument or how we can make an argument for all these people. But just so happy to have Mole back on our TV screens, y'all. It was 2 years from the last time we had it, and what, like 20, not 20, like 15 since we had it before that. So, I just hope that it's doing well on Netflix, and I hope we continue to see it for years to come. But until then, let's just be very excited that we're gonna get our finale here on Friday, less than a week away. So we'll definitely be coming back next week, do a deep dive into the whole season and our thoughts on how things eventually shake out. Because I get the feeling that once we figure out exactly what's happening here, like a good murder mystery, and we watch things back, things will kind of eventually make sense for what they're trying to do for this edit. So I guess we'll see which one of us is right here: Ryan, Sean, or Michael, myself, Jack, or Doug. So until then. If y'all made it all the way through this podcast, thank you so much for listening. As always, make sure again check out next week for our official reaction and season review. Until then, though, make sure you like and subscribe for much more content that will be here all summer long. As we're coming again for Canada versus the World, the end of All Stars 9 will be happening for RuPaul's Drag Race, as well as the start of Big Brother 26, which I'm guessing we will have a cast drop any day now, and we will likely have a live draft for that too. So until then, again, if you would like to as well too, who are you sussing? Who are your top mole suspects, and who do you think is going to win it all? Leave your comments in the comments below. Derp. And until then, on behalf of Doug and Jack, this is Renegade, and thanks again for listening, y'all. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.